My story begins with a sentence I spent most of my life trying not to think about. My parents loved my brother Landon more than they ever loved me. I don't say that lightly, and I don't say it to sound dramatic. I say it because it was the truth I woke up to every morning and went to sleep with every night. It shaped who I became, how I moved, and what I expected out of the world. Very little. The favoring didn't begin suddenly. It was woven into everything from the moments we were kids. Landon was the golden child, the charismatic one, the one who could charm his way out of anything. Teachers adored him. Neighbors laughed at all his jokes, and my parents stood behind him with unwavering pride. Meanwhile, I was the one who cleaned up after his messes, sometimes literally, sometimes emotionally. When Landon forgot to do his chores, my parents asked me why I wasn't being a team player. When Landon broke a window with a baseball, I was blamed for not teaching my younger brother to be careful, even though he was 2 years older. It was the unwritten rule in our house. If Landon did it, somehow it was my fault. I learned early to stay quiet, to keep my head down, to avoid adding fuel to the fire I could never win against. I immersed myself in schoolwork because it was the only place where my effort actually mattered. But even then, my achievements were overshadowed by Landon's flair. He'd get a C on a paper, and my parents would celebrate his effort, while I brought home an A and heard nothing but a distracted, "Good job, Evan." Over time, resentment seeped into places I didn't even realize had been bruised. But I didn't speak up. People who are used to being ignored rarely do. When we became adults, the divide only deepened. Landon drifted from job to job, always convinced he was meant for bigger things, but never willing to work for them. And still, my parents supported him emotionally, financially, sometimes even legally. Somehow, he always had a new car, new gadgets, a new apartment, while I was budgeting down to the dollar. I heard them whisper once, "Evan's responsible. He'll understand. Landon just needs more help." They said it with such tenderness, as if enabling him was an act of love. Maybe it was. It just wasn't love for me. When our dad died suddenly of a heart condition, the shock hit me harder than expected. Despite everything, I'd always hoped there would be some moment, a conversation, an apology, a recognition that would make all those years worth something. But grief doesn't wait for closure. And in the days after the funeral, the imbalance between Landon and me became even more obvious. Landon strutted around the house like he already owned it, reassuring relatives that our parents trusted him to handle things. I stayed silent, sorting paperwork and comforting my mother, who looked too fragile to question anything. A week later, we got the call that the estate meeting had been scheduled. My mother insisted on coming, but she looked hollowed out, exhausted by both loss and years of trying to keep peace between her sons. Landon arrived to the lawyer's office, dressed like he was heading to an awards ceremony, grinning like he'd already received his inheritance. "Don't worry, Evan," he joked, slapping my back. "I'm sure they left you something sentimental. A watch, maybe. Or a box of old pictures." His tone was light, but his eyes were cruel. I didn't respond. I had learned the power of staying quiet long ago. The lawyer, Mr. Hale, greeted us with an expression so serious it immediately tightened the air in the room. His office smelled faintly of old books and lemon polish, and the thick mahogany table felt like a barrier between the past and whatever future was about to be forced on us. Landon lounged in his chair, tapping his foot impatiently. My mother sat rigidly, twisting a tissue between her fingers. I kept my gaze fixed on the folder in front of Mr. Hale, a folder that seemed much thicker than it should have been. When the meeting finally began, Mr. Hale cleared his throat and opened the folder. "Before we begin," he said in a tone that made Landon sit up straighter, "I need you to know that there were several irregularities discovered in your father's estate documents." The room froze around his words. My mother gasped softly. I felt my stomach clench. Landon's confident smirk flickered for the first time. And that was the moment I realized something was very, very wrong. Landon's smirk returned almost immediately, though it didn't recover its full shine. He leaned back in his chair with exaggerated ease, waving a dismissive hand in the air as if the lawyer mentioning irregularities was nothing more than a formality. "I'm sure it's just some paperwork thing," he said with a laugh that didn't quite land. "Dad probably forgot to update something. He was terrible with documents. My mother shot him a sharp look, but she didn't correct him, and that silence was something I'd grown used to. Mr. Hale didn't respond to Landon's attempt at humor. Instead, he slipped on a pair of reading glasses and pulled out several sheets of paper thick with numbers and highlighted entries. As executor, I must review the entirety of the estate, he said. And in doing so, I noticed multiple withdrawals made from your parents' accounts that did not match their spending patterns. My pulse quickened. I could feel the tension rising like steam in the room. Landon, however, rolled his eyes dramatically. Can we skip this? Everyone knows Dad trusted me with the accounts. My mother stiffened. It was slight, barely a twitch, but I saw it. Because Dad didn't trust Landon with anything financial. Not anymore, at least. I remembered clearly the argument they had a year before he died, the one behind closed doors that ended with my father saying in a tone I had never heard, "This is the last time, Landon." I didn't know then what it meant, but the memory hit me like a slap. Landon must have seen the shift in me, because he shot me a glare that warned me to keep quiet. Mr. Hale slid the bank statements across the table. These withdrawals were made over several months, he said. Large amounts, tens of thousands. Every bit of air seemed to vanish from the room. My mother pressed a hand to her chest as if she had been struck. Landon was silent now, the tapping of his foot suddenly frantic instead of confident. His eyes darted between the papers and the lawyer, and for the first time in years, he looked genuinely unsure of himself. Someone accessed their accounts using the same credentials used for the household bills, Mr. Hale continued. However, your father noted in his documents that he had changed the passwords. Only one other person knew them besides him. He paused deliberately, letting the implication hang heavy in the room. Landon's jaw clenched. Are you saying what I think you're saying? He snapped. Because if you're accusing me... But the lawyer held up a hand. I am not accusing anyone. I am stating facts. I watched my brother, my cocky, arrogant, untouchable brother begin to unravel. The golden child persona cracked at the edges, revealing something more fragile, more scared. Beneath, he pointed a finger at me, a trembling one. Maybe Evan did it, he said quickly. He always thought he deserved more. Maybe he needed the money. Maybe... Enough, my mother whispered sharply. It startled everyone, even me. She wasn't a woman who raised her voice, or even used that tone, unless something cut deep. She looked at me then, her eyes glassy with confusion and fear. Evan wouldn't do something like that. It wasn't enthusiastic support, but it was a line drawn in the sand, and Landon knew it. He scoffed, loudly, aggressively, trying to regain control. Oh, please. Evan is practically broke. He could easily... Mr. Hale interrupted again, his tone slow and deliberate. Mr. Clark, the withdrawals were transferred into an account with your name on it. The silence that followed was suffocating. Landon blinked rapidly, shaking his head. No, that's wrong. You must have read something wrong. But, Mr. Hale simply turned the pages toward him, pointing to the account number, the matching name, the digital signature. My brother's face drained of color, leaving him pale and ghost-like. I had seen him scared before, but never cornered, never exposed. My mother pressed her trembling fingers to her mouth. Landon, tell me you didn't. She looked at him like she didn't recognize him, like some version of her son she had believed in all her life had suddenly vanished. Landon's voice cracked. It was temporary. I was going to pay it back. I needed it. The admission hung in the room like a confession no one was ready to hear. The lawyer exhaled slowly. Your parents were aware of the missing money, he said. Your father was gathering evidence before his passing. My mother let out a sound, half gasp, half sob, that tore through me in a way I didn't expect. Landon buried his face in his hands, but it wasn't remorse I saw. It was fear. Mr. Hale closed the folder gently. There is more to review, he said, but both of you need to remain for the continuation of this meeting. Landon swallowed hard, staring at the table, his confidence completely shattered. I stayed silent, but inside, something shifted, a feeling I hadn't had in years. For the first time, I knew the truth was finally catching up with him. The atmosphere in the room felt thick enough to wade through as Mr. Hale reached into the folder again, retrieving a sealed manila envelope. Its edges were worn, like it had been handled many times before finally finding its way to this moment. "This," he said quietly, "was written by your father 2 weeks before his death. He requested that it only be opened after his passing, and only in the presence of both sons." My mother's breath hitched, and I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. Even Landon, who had always believed himself untouchable, looked suddenly small. The lawyer broke the seal with a careful precision that made my stomach twist. Paper rustled as he unfolded the letter, and a strange, heavy silence filled the room. I glanced at my mother, whose eyes were fixed on the letter like it held the last remaining piece of her husband. Landon shifted in his seat, jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. Every second felt like the buildup before a storm's first crack. "This letter, Mr. Hale began, was written to address concerns your father had regarding his accounts, his estate, and his relationship with both of you." Landon immediately scoffed, though the sound lacked its usual arrogance. "Concerns? Dad trusted me. He always trusted me." But his voice wavered, betraying him. Mr. Hale didn't acknowledge the interruption. He simply continued reading. "To my sons, Landon and Evan," the lawyer recited. "If you are hearing this, it means I didn't get the chance to have the conversation I planned. And for that, I am deeply sorry. There are things I needed to say that I hope will bring clarity, even if they cause pain first." The tone of my father's words hit me like a punch to the gut. It sounded like him, calm, steady, rational, even when addressing something heavy. Mr. Hale paused briefly, letting us breathe, then continued. "Landon, I discovered several transactions from our shared accounts that I did not authorize. I confronted you once about this, and you promised it would never happen again. But the withdrawals continued, and I realized you were using your mother's trust in you to bypass boundaries I had set." My mother's hand flew to her chest as if she'd been stabbed. Landon's face twisted with panic, but he said nothing. That alone spoke volumes. "I intended to handle this matter privately," the letter continued. "But as I gathered documents, I realized something far more painful. I had allowed favoritism to blind me to patterns I should have recognized long ago. I made excuses for you, Landon, even when those excuses hurt Evan." My throat tightened so sharply I had to swallow hard just to keep breathing. For years, I had wondered if I imagined the imbalance. Hearing my father admit it even from beyond the grave hit me with a mix of validation and grief I wasn't prepared for. Mr. Hale continued, his voice steady. "Evan, I owe you an apology. You bore the weight of your brother's actions far too often. You stepped aside when asked, sacrificed without recognition, and endured blame that was not yours to carry. I see it now with clarity I wish had come sooner." I blinked rapidly, trying to process the words. My mother reached for my hand with a trembling grip, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Evan." But I could barely hear her over the echo of my father's apology. The lawyer cleared his throat softly before going on. "The estate needed to be handled fairly, based on responsibility and trust, not charm or convenience. I have rewritten portions of my will to correct these imbalances and protect the future of our family. What I discovered about the accounts made the decision necessary." Landon's breathing grew loud and ragged, like he was trying to hold himself together through sheer force of will. His eyes darted between me and the letter, as if searching for a version of reality where none of this was happening. The lawyer folded the letter slowly, placing it on the table with deliberate care. "This is only one part of what your father left behind," he said. He also organized a folder of financial records, including statements, emails, and documents that confirm everything mentioned in his letter. He slid another folder forward, thicker than the last, its contents held shut by 2 metal clips. I felt a cold wave wash over me. I had expected favoritism, excuses, maybe even bias, but not hidden investigations, secret letters, and evidence of deliberate wrongdoing. Landon broke the silence with a harsh, shaky laugh. "Documents can be faked. Anyone could." "Landon," my mother whispered, her voice trembling, "please, stop." She looked like she was seeing him clearly for the first time in her life, and it broke something in her expression. Mr. Hale opened the final file and pulled out a separate envelope, marked in bold handwriting I recognized instantly. "To be opened after the letter." His eyes met ours. "This envelope," he said, "contains the part your father wanted read last. He believed it would change everything." A chill rippled through me, because deep down, I already knew whatever was in that envelope was the truth our father never got to speak aloud. Mr. Hale held the second envelope with a reverence that made even Landon fall silent. The weight of what it might contain hung in the air like a storm cloud ready to burst. My pulse thudded against my ribs as the lawyer carefully slid a finger under the seal and broke it open. My mother leaned forward, hands clasped at her mouth, bracing for pain she might not be ready to face. Every sound in the room, every breath, every rustle felt magnified. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly into thirds. Somehow, that made it more intimidating. A thick file of evidence was one thing. A single page that needed no supporting documents was something else entirely. Mr. Hale flattened the paper on the table and began to read. His voice steadied the words, but nothing could soften what followed. "This is the final matter I must address," he read. "I wish I could speak these words in person, but circumstances have not allowed it. I have spent years hoping I was wrong, hoping the signs pointed to something else, but they did not." My stomach clenched. The gravity in my father's tone, careful, tired, resigned, sent a ripple of dread through my spine. I knew in that moment the truth was going to hurt. "Landon," the letter continued, "I discovered that the withdrawals were not the only instances of dishonesty. Several of my clients reached out to me with concerns about someone using my name to negotiate side deals. All trails led back to you. I confronted you, and you denied it, but evidence proved otherwise." My mother let out a strangled sound, as though a part of her was breaking beyond repair. Landon's face drained of color, and for once, he didn't argue. He looked frozen. Mr. Hale paused, glancing at my mother before continuing. "You compromised not only my finances, but my reputation. You put my business at risk during a time when I fought to keep it stable for both of you. I cannot ignore this, not as a father, and not as a man who worked his whole life to build something meaningful." Hearing those words felt surreal, like I was witnessing a confession that should have happened years earlier but had been submerged under excuses and second chances. Then came the part that shifted the entire atmosphere in the room. "For these reasons," Mr. Hale read, "I amended the estate to reflect accountability. Landon will receive a trust with strict oversight and limited access, designed to prevent further harm. Evan will inherit the remaining assets, including the house, the land, and full control of my business interests." My breath caught. My mind struggled to process the enormity of it, everything I never expected, everything I never thought I would be trusted with. My mother gasped softly, torn between heartbreak for one son and relief for the other. Landon reacted like a man whose world had been set on fire. "You can't be serious," he exploded, pushing his chair back so violently it screeched across the floor. "Dad wouldn't do that. He wouldn't leave everything to him. This is some manipulation. Evan must have gotten to him." His words were wild, desperate, and so painfully revealing. Mr. Hale remained still, like he had expected this. "Your father made these decisions after consulting with financial advisors and investigators," the lawyer said calmly. "Every document is signed, witnessed, and legally sound." Landon's fury flickered into panic. He turned to our mother, searching for an ally he no longer had. "Mom, you're just going to let this happen. You know Dad always planned for me to take over." But her expression was something I'd never seen before, clear, resolute, and unbearably sad. "I thought he did," she whispered, voice trembling. "I defended you, Landon. I believed you. I trusted you. But your father wasn't a liar, and neither is this letter." She shook her head slowly, as if trying to process the truth while accepting it at the same time. "He tried to protect you without enabling you. We both failed at that." The tension cracked, shifted, and turned into something fragile. Landon slumped into his chair, burying his face in his hands. He wasn't angry anymore, he was unraveling. Years of entitlement, years of favoritism, years of unearned confidence had collided with consequences he'd never imagined would reach him. It was like watching a pillar crumble after finally carrying too much weight. Mr. Hale closed the folder gently, signaling the end of the revelations. "Your father hoped this would be a turning point," he said quietly. "Not a punishment, but a chance for real growth for both of you." His words settled into the room like dust after an explosion. Everything was different now. Everything had changed. As we stood to leave, The lawyer handed me one last envelope, small, sealed, and labeled with my name in my father's handwriting. My heart thumped painfully. Whatever was inside that envelope would shape not just the moment, but the future. I didn't open the envelope right away. My hands were shaking too much, and my mother's silent, shell-shocked presence beside me made the moment feel too heavy to rush. We walked out of the law office together, but Landon stayed behind, still collapsed in his chair, staring at nothing. I could feel the weight of everything that had just happened pressing against my ribs, as if the truth itself had claws. When we reached the car, my mother leaned on the door and let out a breath that sounded like it had been trapped inside her for years. She didn't speak for a long time, and neither did I. The air felt thick, humid with emotion neither of us knew how to process. She finally whispered, "Your father wanted you to know the whole story. Whatever's in that envelope, he meant it for you alone." Her voice cracked in the middle, but she didn't try to hide it anymore. It was the first time she looked at me with something like equal footing, not as the overlooked son, not as the shadow behind my brother, but as someone she now understood she had underestimated. When I finally sat on the edge of my bed that evening, the envelope resting in my lap, I hesitated. My father had saved it specifically for me, and the careful slant of his handwriting made my chest ache. I felt like I was opening both a gift and a wound at the same time. With a slow breath, I slipped my finger under the seal and pulled out a folded letter written in pen. The scent of his cologne lingered faintly on the paper, and it nearly undid me. "Evan," it began in his familiar, steady script, "I know you've spent most of your life believing I valued your brother more. I can't change the way things looked from the outside, but I can give you the truth I never said clearly enough." Already my throat tightened, every line carved into me, reshaping memories I'd held for years. "I trusted you with responsibilities early because you were steady. I gave Landon chances because he needed them. I gave you challenges because you could handle them." As I kept reading, tidal waves of emotion rolled over me. "You became the adult in the room long before either of us should have asked that of you. When your mother and I struggled, you stepped in without being asked. When your brother made dangerous choices, you covered for him. You carried the burdens quietly, and I saw it all. You were not unnoticed, son. You were the reason this family held together as long as it did." I had to stop for a moment, pressing a hand against my eyes as everything blurred. The next paragraph changed everything. "You should also know that the land, the house, and the business were always meant for you not because you are the better son, but because you are the one who understands responsibility, integrity, and long-term vision." I kept my plans quiet to prevent resentment, but maybe I was wrong to hide it. "Still, I hope the day you read this, you understand why I made the choices I did." My heart felt like it was simultaneously breaking and being rebuilt. He ended with the words that finally shattered me. "I am proud of you, Evan. I have always been proud. I hope one day you will learn to be proud of yourself. Use what I've left, not as a prize, but as the beginning of something better than what we were able to give you." I set the letter down gently, hands trembling, my father's voice echoing through every corner of the room in the quietest, loudest way possible. The next morning, I went to see Landon. He was sitting on the back porch of our parents' house, the one that would soon legally be mine, staring into the yard with a hollow expression. The arrogance he always wore like armor was gone, replaced by something painfully human. When he heard me step outside, he didn't turn right away. For a moment, I thought he might ask me to leave, but instead he whispered, "I didn't think he'd actually do it." I sat beside him, leaving space between us. "He didn't do it to punish you," I said quietly. "He did it because he knew we both needed something different. You needed accountability. I needed understanding." Landon rubbed his face harshly, like he was trying to wipe away years of ingrained habits. "I messed up." He admitted 3 words I had never heard him say in my life. "I thought I deserved everything because they always made me feel like I did." The moment felt fragile, but real. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was the first honest step either of us had taken towards something healthier. We talked for nearly an hour about Dad, about Mom, about the mess of our past. For the first time, the conversation didn't feel like a competition. It felt like two brothers standing in the aftermath of the truth, trying to figure out how to rebuild. Later that afternoon, I sat on the porch alone, watching the sun slide behind the trees my father planted decades ago. The house was quiet, but the silence felt different now, full of possibility instead of resentment. The letter rested in my jacket pocket, warm against my chest, grounding me in a way nothing else ever had. I realized, with a depth that reached into every part of me, my father hadn't just left me an inheritance. He'd left me the truth and a chance to finally step into a life that was mine.